Chair, we will be ready to begin at 6:30.
And it is 6:30. I will call this regular meeting of the Schlater Regional Board to order. And the first item of business for us is an approval of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. Director Leishman, and was that Director McCormick? Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Chair?
Yes.
You called for any discussion?
Pardon?
You called for any discussion, right? I raised my hand.
Yes.
My question is item 15.2. My understanding that this was brought forward as a notice of motion at the April Committee of the Whole. My understanding is that a notice of motion is for an item to go before the Assembly at the next meeting of the same. Since the notice of motion was made at Committee of the Whole, then shouldn't it go before the agenda of the May Committee of the Whole meeting rather than directly to the board?
Board Officer.
Thank you, Chair. At the time, I believe Director Brander had indicated that he was bringing it forward to the board meeting. And that was in time for it to be included on the agenda.
Thank you. So it was stated clearly at the committee that it would come, that he was going to present it to the board, and time did permit. So it's with us tonight. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? None carried. And if I can get this thing to scroll back up where I was. Come on. There we go. We have the minutes of the special regional board of March the 14th. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, a motion to adopt. Thank you, Director Dowd. Director Leishman. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None carried. Minutes of the regular board meeting of March the 30th. Any errors or omissions? None? A motion to adopt. Director Dowd. Thank you. Director Brander. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None carried. And we have modified the agenda, bringing the audited financial statements up front. So we shall hear from we have our motion to approve the Schlater Regional District financial statements for the year ended December 31st, and the auditor is with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So moved.
Yeah. Sorry, I was waiting.
We'll get the report in a first. Yes.
Okay. So I do have a presentation for the regional district report. Please let me know if you can see.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the board for having me here today to present to the regional district. I will take you a short slide presentation. Again, start off with a thank you to the Director of Finance and all the staff at the regional district for helping us with the audit this year. We really appreciate the time and effort that they put in to both prepare the financial statements and to go through the audit process. Happy to also be providing a clean audit opinion for the regional district again this year. So for tonight's presentation, I will take you through some quick financial statement highlights for 2021, talk a little bit about the audit process and our audit findings, and then I will finish up with a little bit of financial analysis as a little bit of additional discussion points. So jumping right in, the statement of financial position, or the balance sheet, what we used to call the balance sheet, at December 31st, 2021. That regional district has cash and investments of $17.9 million. When you add in the receivables, there are total financial assets of $42.7 million. The regional district's own debt, so that is just the RD's debt, not all of the member municipality debt. But the regional district portion is $2,664,000. When we add in the accounts payable and other liabilities that are on the books, total liabilities are $34.7 million. we subtract those liabilities from the total financial asset position, you get the net position for the regional district of just shy of $8 million. And you can see that that has increased from the prior year's 6.5. The tangible capital assets, infrastructure, buildings, equipment being managed by the regional district are $21.9 million at the end of the year. That is a net book value, so the historic cost and depreciated over time to estimate the usage of those assets. And last number on the slide, accumulated surplus of 30.1 million. I will get into that, what's in that number in about 3 or 4 slides here. So the statement of operations, or the income statement, showing the activities throughout the year. Total revenues down a little bit from 2020, so 13.4 million. 2020 had some significant grant funding, and there's always timing around various projects. On the expense side, expenses of just shy of 10.5 million, up from the 9.5 in the prior year, which is one thing that we would expect, with remembering that 2020 was a year very hit by the pandemic, and that service levels and costs would have come back in 2021. So that's why you're seeing some increase there, but still an annual surplus position at the end of 2021 of $2.9 million. So that is an accounting surplus of $2.9 million. I like to go to the cash flow statement next and look at what actually went through the main bank accounts. Operations at the regional district brought in $3.8 million in 2021. Capital projects, capital spending of $2.2 million. Net of transactions with the regional hospital district, there was financing, funding available from financing and debt of $1.1 million. And so a net cash inflow at the end of the year of $2.6 million, just a little bit down from the prior year's $2.8 million. Promised I would tell you what's in the accumulated surplus. It's a big number, $30.1 million. You can see at the top that most of it is actually physical assets, things that you can touch, and things that provide services for the community, not cash in the bank account. So $19.2 million invested in the tangible capital assets. There's a waste management reserve of $1.1 million, very similar balance to the prior year. Future project reserve, future expenditures, $4.4 million. In the statutory reserves, there's another $4.5 million. And then the function balances have a small surplus of $663,735. Shifting gears a little bit away from the financial statements and into the audit and the process. I mentioned off the top, we are providing a clean audit opinion. That is what auditors call an unqualified opinion, or an opinion without modification. So we are satisfied that your financial statements are presented in all material respects in accordance with the appropriate accounting framework for local government, which is the public sector accounting standards. We're ready to sign the report. We've got all of our last little bits of work done. The last step being board approval here tonight after the presentation. When we perform our audit, just a few notes of what we're doing in the course of the audit. We are looking at the controls in place at the regional district, making sure that they are safeguarding assets, doing proper risk management, and now enabling accurate financial reporting to the board. We sample transactions throughout the year. We don't look at every transaction. And another very important here, another thank you to staff. Linda and Jason put a lot of time and effort into working on the audit with us, and other members of the finance department and throughout the regional district. So the audit is complete. The important number on this slide is the second bullet there, a materiality number used of $500,000. So we calculate that as a percentage of your revenue, to be close to 4% of your annual revenues. What that means is two things. One is it drives the amount of testing that we're doing. We're looking at every transaction over $500,000, and we sample underneath using that $500,000 number to drive how much testing we'll do. If we found something that we disagreed with your staff on, and it was larger than $500,000, I couldn't give you a clean audit opinion. So that's another important way that materiality is used. But we are providing a clean audit opinion, so there are no significant items that we would call unadjusted in the financial statements. No limitations placed on the performance of our audit. We are able to see all the documentation we wanted to see, talk to all the people we wanted to talk to. We didn't find any irregularities or any evidence of unusual transactions. A reminder that in the context of an audit, we are not looking for fraud, or we're not performing a forensic investigation. But if something came to our attention, it will be required to report it back to the board. So I don't have anything to report in that respect tonight. Do confirm our independence. So MNP as a firm did not do any other projects with the regional district that would impair our ability to give you an independent audit opinion. And that covers from January 1st, 2021, the start of the fiscal year, all the way through to today when we're signing off on the financial statements and the audit. I'll wrap up with going back into the numbers a little bit. So we started looking just at 2021 and the financial results for that 1 year. We like to then look at a trend analysis of the last 5 years and look at a few areas to see, are there any indicators of movements and trends and numbers and things that you should be concerned about as a board. So we start by looking at sustainability. This is a ratio which compares your financial assets, so your cash and receivables, things that you're going to be able to realize and use to pay for services or goods. And we compare that to your liabilities. Here we're looking for this magic number of 1. If this ratio dips below 1, that means you are raising taxes or user fees in the future to pay for the past. If you're above 1, you've got some reserves and some funds set aside to pay for future projects. So the good news for that regional district is you are above 1. It's been consistent at 1.24 and 1.23 in the prior year. And doesn't, it's holding steady. It's not shifting in any one direction. That would be a concern. The next one we look at is flexibility. So here we look at the rough aging of your assets to see if there's going to be a lot of demands on your finances with respect to maintaining infrastructure. So we compare the net book value or the depreciated value of the assets to what they originally cost when they were purchased or constructed. So the carrying value has held steady for the last few years at about 71%. We did see some capital spending when we're looking at the cash flow statement, I believe just over $2 million in the year. You're holding the line on this ratio and not a lot of movement around that 71% mark. So it means you're staying on top of some of, from an accountant and auditor perspective, you're staying on top of some of those costs and keeping up with the depreciation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I will turn off the sharing and I would be happy to answer any questions about the financial statements or the audit findings.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderhoost. Do any directors have questions? Director Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderhoost, for that. That was a good presentation. I just had one question about the financial analysis that you just showed, and you showed a ratio of and I can't remember exactly the terms you used, but reserves basically to liabilities. Was that what it was? And you showed greater than 1 is good, and we're at 1.23. Is there a good benchmark to shoot for that? I mean, is that above 1? Obviously you explained, but is that a high number, or is higher better, or is there a value that's too high?
Thank you, Director Fall. It's a good question, and maybe I'll answer it in the context of what I see in your neighbors and the other regional districts that I work with around. Is most communities I see somewhere between 1 and 2. I mean, when you start getting into the twice as many as financial assets as liabilities, you start to have a lot of cash on hand, and that is a tricky thing as well, right? To have, there is a balance. You want to be looking at the long range asset planning and what you need to be spending money on to continue providing services and maintaining the quality of life for the community. So there's no magic number or to aim for. I have, if any of the communities I work with fall below that 1, we have a very different conversation about the fact that you're paying what your taxes are actually going to. But most communities are in honestly right kind of where you are, 1.2 to 1.5 seems to be a pretty reasonable range to fall in.
Thank you. That was very good.
Any other questions? We thank you then, Mr. Vanderhost.
Thank you very much.
I will entertain a motion to adopt the Director Leishman and Director Gisborne. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Thank you.
Done.
Done. We have no delegations, no inquiries, no unfinished business, no correspondence. Chair's report. Well, we have an item on the agenda for later tonight regarding water services, etc., and acquiring services. At the end of March, I met with the receiver in charge of the Lund Water Improvement District. The CAO and I met Mr. Tom Day, and he brought us up to speed just as to what the situation up there is. Can't say any more than that because the wheels are turning within the provincial government. We'll wait and see what happens with them. It was I think a good talk. I also, since we just had the auditor's report, I met with the CAO and I met with the auditors just this week. And we were able to assure the auditors that we're not aware of any odd goings on, hanky-panky or anything else going on in the RD. And that seemed to make them reasonably happy. This morning, I have in the past attended the ceremony for the Day of Mourning at our cemetery. It hasn't been held for 2 years due to COVID, but this was good. It was good to get back there. And there were some speeches made, or at least brief talks. The distressing news was given by the WorkSafe representative, who advised us that the number of WorkSafe fatalities in British Columbia rose last year over the previous year, which is unfortunate. As always, and it's happened every time, I've listened to great compliments from the Assembly on the way the cemetery is maintained by our staff. Every year I hear that. I think it's important that the staff get that message as well, that what they do there is greatly appreciated. With that, I'm going to turn it over. Director Leishman, it's so good to see you in person.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to finger you right now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really a crazy month of April. I'm looking at my calendar going, holy man, that was a lot of meetings. Of course, starting off with the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Conference that a lot of us attended, which was really nice to be back in person in Victoria. So I was grateful to be able to attend. I was a bit stressed out about the, being in groups of people again, but it was fine. It was all good. So that was great. Yeah, lots of meetings. I've actually had several meetings, sort of through the city mostly, but it always sort of gets into the regional as well on housing affordability, housing, lack of housing is coming up on a regular basis. So there've been a number of meetings on that, and a housing roundtable meeting with some of the nonprofits locally. So, we're taking that very seriously at the city level, and regionally, our regional social planner is very heavily involved in that. So hoping that something can start to happen on the housing front, and a lot of climate action, different sessions, Zoom meetings. I was asked to speak with a class at Brooks School, so that was neat. I ended up doing it through Zoom because I had been at the AVICC and a couple of our members of council had tested positive for COVID. So I thought I'll just be safe just to make sure, and I'll just come in Zoom. So it was good to chat with the class, and yeah, there's a lot of movement, a lot of awareness now, obviously, with the last year or two of climate impact issues in our province specifically, that it's really coming to the forefront. So there's a lot more activity at the provincial level. And I think we're going to be seeing more funding coming in for helping local governments deal with climate adaptation and mitigation. So it's been good to hear how that's rolling out through the budget as well. So yeah, just a busy time, but that's about all I have to report.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Up above you, and overlooking us, is Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. Also a pretty busy month. At AVICC, I found myself at the second Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Coastal Leadership Plan working session held at the Barden Banker, committing with a councillor from the Highlands, just outside Victoria, under high pressure from the session organizers to take on a joint task. And we somehow agreed that we will plan to organize a workshop at the next AVICC on challenges and solutions for how small communities and local governments can deal with climate adaptation and mitigation, building on the workshop that was at AVICC. It's easy to think big when you're small, but focused on climate change. So we're both committed now, whether we, there's an election between here and there, so we will see. I was, of course, happy that both our resolutions were endorsed. That was great, and then many other ones. On April the 11th, I attended the Lesquiti Local Trust Committee of the Islands Trust. The Islands Trust is in the process of updating their policy statement, which is an their overarching policy to everything that they do. This process has been very long and not without controversy, given that some view steps to strengthen, some steps that strengthen and their preserve and protect mandate, and others view those steps as increasing limits on use of their property or increasing costs and bureaucracy. So it's a bit tense, but I can just observe and watch. On April the 13th, the Coastal Invasive Species Committee meeting there was a couple meetings that week, but we're continuing on the strategic planning process, looking at the survey that the board filled out, and I sit on a subgroup that will take the next step to take the results and come up with a draft strategic plan. So that's a bit active. That was the same day that I attended 1.5 sessions of the flood adaptation strategy session that was held by the QRD. On April the 19th, I was happy to be able to join the preview session of the coastal flood mapping. That information will be very useful for planning, emergency response, and other applications. Last week, very good news, the Vancouver Island Regional Library and BC GEU Local 702, which represents VIRL librarians, reached an agreement. So the library services can ramp back up. They hadn't been disrupted very much, but the process of healing and services can be moving forward. April 21st, I attended a workshop organized by the province on the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Persons Act and on guidance for local governments. So that was there was some good information in that. On Tuesday, I had the pleasure of meeting our manager of asset management, Ms. Howie, in person for the first time, along with our planner, Ms. Rodden, and our Fire Smart coordinator, Mark Albert. It was good to see multiple staff using the opportunity to share a water taxi to Lesquiti for the day. I think that's a really good. I think people on Lesquiti are usually very pleased when that happens, and it provided an opportunity to show a glimpse of our community hall, on which renovations are nearly complete. And finally, yesterday, the Lesquiti Waste Manager, Mark Bottomley, organized a tire removal day. And as far as I understand, a full barge load of tires left the island, which was very good to make use of that. And I'm sure there are many more sitting behind people's garages and woodsheds and so on. So I think that will be something that hopefully happens again, but it's really good to see tires going the other way. They do not do wonders just sitting there in the rain, getting deteriorated and breaking down, getting into the creeks. So that's all I have to report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Fall. I'll move around. Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you, Chair. On March 31st, I traveled to Victoria to meet with the AVICC executive for convention planning. This was our first in-person convention in 2 years, and I'm pleased to see many of you attended. On April the 1st, I attended the workshop for the Legislative Reform Initiative, which was being led by Tyler Brown, which I'm very excited to kind of see where he plans to go with that and other members of our association. The Electoral Area Forum was excellent, but as always, feels a little too short with all the issues being experienced in rural areas. On the 2nd, I attended the Climate Leadership Plan and Big Movers in the Decade of Climate Action, which was wonderful. And I believe Director Falls spoke about the second half of that session. I was not able to make it as I had to go over and introduce the facilitator and help moderate the session of It's Easy to Think Big When You're Small, with presentations from Sarah Fowler, Dennis Buchanan, Julie Colburn, Dennis Dugas, Mako Noel as well, and we had Travis Hall there as well for helping moderate. It was a wonderful session. On the April the 3rd, during the third session of the resolutions, there was discussion around the provincial government's posturing around development approvals and local government's roles. As those of you that were there, things got a little heated and something I thought was a little unexpected. At one point, at one mic, the con mic, we had Al Sebring, Lisa Helps, myself, and John Allen Jack, and those were 4 people. I never thought you'd see all at the same mic, but things got heated, and it was all coming down to housing, which is very important for all of us. The following week, I attended the Electoral Area Directors Forum, as well as the Local Government Leadership Academy. There were many wonderful presentations and engaging workshops. The results of one of those is on tonight's agenda, as I believe 15.2, brought forward by Director Brander. And let's see, what else do I got here? I got a whole list, but I'll try and make it quick. And then on Monday, the 25th of April, which was this week, we had 2 great presentations from Michael McBurney, the regional planner for the Agricultural Land Commission, regarding residential flexibility changes in the ALR. Wonderful information, great information there. The presentation around residential flexibility changes can be found on the agenda of the 25th for the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So if you're curious, take a look there, or I'm sure our planner can help you find that information. And the second presentation at that meeting was from Angela Boss, the regional agrologist with the Ministry of Agriculture, regarding programs, updates at the ministry, and other grant and funding opportunities for local agriculture in various communities. Lots of information, but that ends my director's report because I don't want to take up all night. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. Director McCormick, you're next on the screen.
Well, thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what others have said about AVICC, except to say that it really was great to be there in person. And I went specifically to find out how other regional districts spend community works money and how they allocate it. And that was something that I was able to find out, at least from a number of them. So it was great to be there. Back on Texada, on the 7th, I attended the policing committee meeting, which again was the first one in person for many, many months. And the conservation officer attended and gave quite a good presentation on hunting and how it went this year. It was reasonable. There were still incidents that occurred, but not as many. Things like arrows being found in people's back porches and stuff like that. It was a little better, I guess, than in past years. On the 10th, I attended the Health Services Society AGM, which is where the subject of the Green Armband program came up. Now, I'll explain a bit what that is, but first I have to express appreciation to Chair Leishman for following up when I got in touch with her about the Green Armband program and why it is being created. I was really quite shocked. At that health services meeting, I heard first-person accounts of people being discharged from emergency in the middle of the night. I heard stories of others being discharged with no shoes, no coat, no money, no way to get home. These are people who will have come in by ambulance, not taken their purse or their wallet or a change of clothes or really anything. And then, so the Green Armband program identifies people from the island so that when emergency staff are discharging patients, they will see the Green Armband and say, okay, wait at least till the first ferry is coming so that you can at least have a warm, safe place to sit during the evening or the middle of the night. Anyway, it was a very heated and I guess, poignant meeting where a lot of first person accounts were told. And so I did take these to Chair Leishman and she looked into it. And so thank you very much for doing that. I will certainly pass on the information about the patient care quality board and what it can do. So that was health services. On the 12th, I attended a meeting virtually with MOTI, and this was I guess a regular quarterly meeting, which has happened sporadically during COVID, but it follows on a in-person meeting on Texada that I reported about last month, at which a number of concerns were raised. I followed that up with a discussion regarding those key concerns, and Michael Braun, who's the regional manager for this area for MOTI, did agree to follow up on the issue of debris being slashed at the side of the road and left in the culverts, in the ditches, creating flooding hazards in the winter and potentially fire hazards in the summer. So he is looking into that, and I do appreciate him for doing that. On the 13th, I was at the also virtual, the government information session regarding the coastal flood adaptation strategy. And yeah, it looks pretty scary. So I guess we'll hear more about that. On the 19th, there was the Regional Emergency Executive Committee, and the terms of reference for that committee are being reworked. Also on the 19th, I attended the SAFE Act meeting. And boy, I have to say that our social planner, Mariko Kubota, is one heck of a juggler, because she keeps so many things at the air at the same time. It's really just quite very impressive with what she reports. Under housing, which is one of the key areas for SAFE Act, they have been working with marginalized people, excuse me, homeless, and trying to get people the shelter that they needed through the winter and the cold weather months. There is a partnership going on with Powell River Living magazine, or sorry, Get That Living magazine, and regarding housing and what housing can be, different types of housing, different situations. And so I look forward to reading that series, which is bringing housing into the forefront of discussion. Under the poverty subtitle, she reported on creation of a seniors planning table, which will get a number of seniors leaders together to talk about ways to recover from COVID and get people back into, a better situation, those who are socially isolated and have trouble reconnecting again. So that's what that group will work on, and that's pretty amazing that will happen. Under early years, she talked about a number of things, including the lack of the early childhood educators, trained personnel, which is something that affects our whole area. We don't have a single one on Texada, although we do have a preschool, and it becomes more challenging, and especially where housing is concerned. If you're trying to recruit someone new, where will they live, etc. So she's continuing to work on that. Moving on to Earth Day, Lafarge, which is their largest employer on Texada, they did a collection day for things that are hard to get rid of, such as paint cans, oil, used motor oil, batteries, things like that are really difficult. So they had a collection day to bring in, and I don't have a total weight or result of that, but I know it was quite a bit of stuff. So I want to say thank you to Lafarge for doing that. On the 26th, I attended Tourism Powell River, and that's the last thing I'm going to talk about. So I'm almost finished. They talked about recovering to really pre-COVID numbers in the tourism industry. Isn't going to happen this year. It will happen, they hope, next year. Staff are also, they're undertaking some Tla'amin language training, which is as they hope to integrate some of the language into the information that they give out. They were talking about the success of the community app, which they developed last year, which I hope you all have in your phone. It gives you how to connect with everything that's going on in the Klah region. and it's being done by quite a number of other tourism providers throughout the province. So it's great that we're part of that group. For the first time in 5 years, Tourism Fall River will be offering a scholarship to a Brooks grad this year. For the last 5 years, there has been no one even remotely wanting to pursue work in the tourism industry. And this year, one of the graduate students was identified as having an interest in this area. And so that person will be getting a scholarship from Tourism Fall River. And that's great that that has happened. And finally, they're planning now for the 2 summer students that they will hire. One of them is going to work on a program theme, which is welcome back is the theme. And for a lot of businesses and hospitality providers, yeah, welcome back is definitely the theme. And so the student is going to be supporting work with them. And the second youth will be a First Nations youth, a Tla'amin youth, who will be providing opportunities to connect tourists with workshops and more information on carving, weaving, and beadwork. So those are 3 things that will be great to be able to spread the information about that. So thank you, Chair. That is my report.
Thank you for being brief.
As always.
Director Dowd.
A busy time. One of the benefits of the brevity of the other reports is I've had plenty of time to make mine longer. So I attended as well the ABICC from April 1st to the 3rd, and it was an interesting time. It was actually good to see people face to face again. Although it did have its risks, because a couple of the people I was sitting beside at the celebratory dinner ended up over the next few days to have COVID. In one case, quite a long-lasting bout of COVID. I was lucky enough that I didn't test positive any time after returning home. But I think that's some of the risks we're going to have to learn to face and find appropriate ways to deal with it. But I found the convention overall great. Getting together and having those face-to-face discussions in the quiet time on the convention floor is invaluable. One of the things I came away with after sitting and discussing a whole bunch of different things with the Sunshine Coast Regional District is that they expressed an interest in getting together face-to-face with us from the Gazette Regional District sometime soon, hopefully before the elections come up. We've met with each other once before, hopefully. Well, I think we had hoped to meet many times over the period of our term in office, but I had a request from them to get together at least once before the elections come up, and we possibly have new people around the table. I think that's a good idea. I think a couple of other things I attended. One was the Small Communities Thinking Big, or Thinking Big for Small Communities. And it was a group of people that are coming from really small communities. I'm talking about 500-person communities where they have to reach out to all the areas around to try to get together enough people and enough funds to have a volunteer fire department with one fire truck. So encouraging to listen to all of the stories about the things they've been able to do by working together with each other. So going on from that, after the ABICC was kind of an exciting time. On the 8th at noon, the Supportive Housing Community Advisory Committee actually met at the Supportive Housing in the city of Fall River. I was there representing the regional district. It's a large committee, about 20 people, including staff of the facility, first responders, police, fire, ambulances, the community representatives. They're just people at large from 2 parts of the community bordering the supportive housing, a actual resident of the supportive housing who had his own definite point of view on how things are and how they could be improved. And myself and Councillor Hathaway, who was representing the city on that committee. Now, it's been It hasn't met through COVID, and I think that's had an impact on the community. And it looks like this is going to become a regular monthly proceed. And the time for May is already booked, so I'm looking forward to that continuing on. There was I attended the MOTI, Ministry of Transportation meeting virtually with many others that are in this room, talking about all of the issues with the Highways Department locally throughout the city and the regional district and all the different areas, and speaking to the local managers. Sadly enough, they are not the ones who control the budget. They have some say in the local application of funding and some ability to manage, but they don't have access to the funding. And let's say, I think from my point of view, our desires far outstrip the funding that they have available to. I went to the coastal flooding consultation. That was on the 13th, and that's coming up for discussions throughout the period of May, as well as a couple more meetings as that process develops along the way. As an aside, part of the impact of that was being discussed at the city's finance committee meeting today, as we were talking about funding restoration of the seawall from the damage of the high tides and high winds last winter that we expect to happen again in the future. So zipping on, where do we go? I think that is what I'm going to report on.
Thank you very much.
Deeper than I thought it might be.
And last but not least, of course, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. ABICC, everybody's talked about it. One thing that nobody mentioned is one of the sessions I enjoyed, which was the biking tour. I want to say that the area, the city, the Catholic Regional District, and in the case of Director Leishman, we were well represented because 3 of us out of, I think, 10 attendees were from the local area. So obviously active transportation is very important to us. The EA Directors Forum, lots of good stuff. A real positive report from BC Recycling, and some good information again about active transportation from the Ministry of Transportation. At the LGLA Forum, there were 2 particular sessions that kind of hit home. One was forging a path to responsible conduct, and the other was equity, diversity, and inclusion, which was put on by Lidstone and Company. They were both very good because of the comments that were not only made by the presenters, but by members of the audience as well about personal experiences they'd had. On the 9th, I attended an emergency preparedness meeting down at Lang Bay Hall, which was put on by Jesse McDonald from the QRD and a representative from the Red Cross. Lots of good information there, and they promoted the QRD community notification system. As was mentioned, on April 12th, I attended the Ministry of Transportation meeting, and I spoke about the ongoing challenges concerning the curve at Black Point and the bridge at the fish hatchery just south of there. The bridge is, in my opinion, far too narrow for safe passage of cyclists, pedestrians. Hopefully something will be improved upon that in the near future. We were told that the Highway 101 corridor will be, I guess, investigated or looked at by somebody on a higher level. I don't know what that means or what that will lead to, but hopefully something positive. And then on the 13th, I also attended, along with, I think, pretty much everybody here, the flood mapping strategy online session, the joint QRD, Tlahama Nation and City of Powell River Initiative. That's it. Thank
you. In that case, we'll move on to the consent agenda. With the usual rules, this is an opportunity to pull an item if you want to amend it or vote against it. Any takers? Hearing none, a motion to adopt the consent. Thank you, Director Leishman and Director Brander. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay. Takes us down to correspondence dated March. Oh, that's what am I doing? Roll right past all that.
I believe we're at number 12.1.
Hey, 12.1. The water and wastewater utility system acquisition policy, and we're going to get a verbal update from Melissa Howie. So I think we should take the verbal update first. Ms. Howie.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, staff have reviewed the policy again and have come to see how a couple of the areas could provide an opportunity for some confusion. So staff has taken the initiative to introduce a couple of minor text amendments into the policy to clarify the intent of those sections. And so in section 6.3, the self-sustaining service, the words manage utilities as a standalone service have been amended and replaced with manage each utility as a discrete service. And then in section 7.1 and appendix A, the expression of interest component, the words support from local area representative have been replaced with the EOI has been shared with the local area representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a recommendation in front of us.
I'll move it.
Randers approved and seconded by Director Dowd. Thank you. Discussion. I'm very pleased at the changes made. I think they do clarify matters considerably and clean it up. Also, as I mentioned earlier in my report, you know, we're being confronted right now by a water utility district, which is not coming to us at the moment, but we'll see what the province will want to do. And I really think this policy will clarify matters with regard to the public. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None carried. Thank you. We have no bylaws. We have a report, financial assistance to support humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. It says the Ukraine. That's a little obsolete now, actually. It went the way of the Yukon. So, but I think we all understand. So, Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move. I sent to our corporate officer a second part of the motion. So the first part of the motion that the board received the report, and the second part of the motion, if it might be shown, and if it gets seconded, I'll explain the idea behind this, so that the board forward consideration of a $6,000 grant in aid to the Canadian Red Cross Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal, with $1,000 from each EA grant in aid and $1,000 from the general grant in aid, to the Finance Committee meeting in May.
Okay, you partially lost me there. So exactly what are you moving?
I'm moving that the board receive the report titled Financial Assistance to Support Humanitarian Efforts in Ukraine, dated April 22.
And stopping there.
No.
No, and the second part that was on the...
Right here.
Oh.
I'll share it. I'm just having a minor technical
Okay.
issue.
Now appearing before me.
Yes, sorry about that. And that the board forward consideration of a $6,000 grant in aid to the Canadian Red Cross Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal, with $1,000 from each electoral area grants and aid service and $1,000 from the general grants and aid service, to the May 18 Finance Committee meeting. And if I get a seconder, I would explain the rationale.
And you've included the "and" in the first part, so it just flows into the second part?
Yes, exactly. It's the first clause and then this instead of the second clause.
All right, we need a seconder for that, if we all understand it. Director McCormick, thank you. Director Fall.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I really appreciate the work done by staff to get this before us tonight. It's a bit outside our normal working. So I think, it's taking a bit to figure this out. And given that we have limited funds available, I think the report really shows, the need is high, that the requests are higher than we have. So we're going to be struggling in May anyways. And also, we're only likely going to be able to consider a single contribution for Ukraine if we do decide that this year, just a single one. So it's not the urgency, the need is urgent, but the urgency is going to be there in 2 or 3 weeks, in a month anyway. So I think the timing is less important. And I think it might be simplest to consider this idea at the same time as the other requests, at which time we will be making necessary adjustments to balance the total amount budgeted for our grants and aid services with the amounts requested. and how much we also want to hang on to for the second intake, because the amounts being requested is more than we have, and there's some second intakes coming. And I looked at the amounts under the requests in the table provided, and looked last year. I did a summary for myself of last year what we gave, and there's a number of organizations that aren't that haven't made it in the first intake. Whether they go in the second one or not, we might want to think about. But in particular, we don't have, for example, any food banks that are asking as of yet. One reason I suggested $1,000 per grant and aid rather than prorated by population is in part to help with this balancing process. I proposed this, and I think there's $1,000 in the electoral area E grant and aid. Director McCormick suggested that maybe in the Texada one that would be okay, but those are just number right now. If the idea is okay, we can adjust them at the meeting if it comes down to it. And finally, considering this at the Finance Committee would also allow us to decide if we prefer to try to help humanitarian efforts in Ukraine, which are very high, such as contributing to the Red Cross, or to help refugees arriving in BC, as the CRD has done, such as contributing to the Ukraine Cultural Center. So we can have that discussion. I'm not fixed on one of them. I just thought that putting this forward, it would show up on our agenda, and then we can have a debate on specific terms of this idea along with the other ones. So that's the rationale behind what I'm putting forward here.
Okay, so you want to send this to the Finance Committee, so this will be an unweighted vote. I'm correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any further discussion? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank staff as well for the work put into this report. I don't really have any objections to discussing this at the committee of the whole, sorry, at the Finance Committee in May. I don't really like the $1,000 from each electoral area too much. And I would also like, when it comes before the Assembly in May, to consider, rather than the Red Cross, to also consider Firefighting Aid Ukraine, which is the organization which is handling the transportation of our supplies and other firefighting supplies being sent over. I also think that doing a direct donation to Red Cross goes a little bit beyond what grant and aid is really intended for. I really much rather support the idea that is used in the Capital Regional District by creating a local impact to try and address this crisis. Those are just my thoughts at this time, but I do like the motion that it's going to be going to the Finance Committee in May, so I'll have more comments then. Thank you, Chair.
Director Doe. Yeah, thank you. This, it kicks a decision down the road. It certainly does that. But we are still in the situation where, except for the Area E grant and aid service, this will leave, every one of those grant funds oversubscribed, basically. So the board will have some tough decisions to make when it comes to the May grant allocation process. We're going to have to grant fewer or come up with some money somewhere. But probably we're going to have to grant fewer than the requests that are all there together. But I think sensible to look at all aspects of the amounts and where they come from at the Finance Committee in May, and consider that, and also consider the right place to use the funds, because at the end of the day, it might be much more effective if there's a way to make a donation that would help somebody settle from the Ukraine within the regional district boundaries. If we knew about a way to do that, that might be more effective and a better way to spend the money local. But we can discuss that at the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you. Director McCormick.
Thank you. Just following on that, would it be possible for the Finance Committee meeting to get a list of what the options are in providing aid, whether it's assisting a group of family locally or providing to the firefighting group, fund or the Red Cross. Could we at least find out what are the choices? And if that information was brought to the committee, then I think it would make our discussion much more focused on finding the right solution. So it's a question really to staff is could that information be provided at the Finance Committee meeting?
It would appear that Ms. Greenan has an answer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we could do some research and put a list of options. I mean, it won't be exhaustive, of course, but we could put some options that the board could consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on sending this rewritten motion to the Finance Committee for May? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Okay. It's going. That brings us the National Day of Mourning Proclamation, which I spoke about earlier, and we have a recommendation before us. What's the pleasure of the board? Director Gisborne?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Fall. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And 15.2, anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy. Director Brander, you're up.
I'd like to move it, please.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Leishman.
Thanks, Chair. As I mentioned in my director's report, Lidstone and Company gave quite a sobering presentation at the LGLA, and I thought they were very progressive by providing memory sticks to whomever wanted them that had the information about how to set up an anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy so that any local government could go out that didn't have one in place and incorporate it into their policies. I hope you've all had a chance to look over it. I think it's done quite well, and I hope you'll all support it.
Thank you. And further discussion? Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I support this this idea, and I think, I mean, really, the information there is really good, and it's really sometimes hard to root out and even identify things that might be seen as racist by some people without actually having a really close look at how things are set up, because it's not always obvious. Sometimes it takes something being pointed out to you, and then suddenly you kind of recognize it, and so having a policy is a good idea. I just have one question, I guess through the chair, maybe to the CAO, in terms of if we did adopt this motion or pass this motion, what would be a reasonable timeline given staff availability to work on this? I mean, it's a lot of it's laid out, but it still will take some, something new for staff to work on. So,
CAO.
Through the chair, I don't know if I can thumbnail that one right now for you, but I can say that or suggest that it won't be at the very next meeting, that's for sure. But let's see if we can't bring this to fruition before August, September, somewhere in there, maybe late summer.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Director Brander for bringing this forward. I do have some concerns, though. I think that, this should be discussed originally by the Committee of the Whole to get as much detail and in depth into the proposal before us. One of the challenges with systemic racism is, to many of us that have privilege, that systemic racism is not overt. It's not apparent to many people. A lot of times it's kind of baked in. It's not direct. And in order to address systemic racism, people need to speak up. They need to have those difficult conversations and bring those challenging conversations into the assembly. My concern is what are the unintended consequences? What are the unintended side effects? Could such a policy have a chilling effect on the assembly where we don't want to have the conversation, the difficult conversation about what policies, what bylaws, what things that exist that say we are currently using, what tools do we have that contribute to systemic racism without us knowingly understanding or experiencing the impact of those policies. That's where I'm a little bit concerned, but I really think that to get deep into that conversation, that needs to occur at the committee level. So I'm going to move that this item be forwarded to the May Committee of the Whole meeting. I'll make that motion.
You're moving to refer it to the May Committee of the Whole?
Yes, it has not gone before Committee of the Whole yet.
We have a motion to refer. Is there a seconder? There's no seconder, so it'll stay as is. Any further discussion? None? Okay, it's been directed to staff and it will come back to us with a report, presumably at the committee.
Do we get to vote?
I'm going to call the vote. Right? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Making it clear as to what's going to happen. We have an in-camera session. And we have Director Leishman in person.
I will read that after question period.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Gilinski, I didn't mean to ignore you.
I know you didn't, Chair. Thank you very much. Everything is pretty straightforward tonight. Thank you. I don't have any questions with regard to the proceedings.
But that's why I scrolled past you.
Exactly.
Director Leishman.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I move that the board move in camera and that the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district. C, labor relations or other employee relations. K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages and that in the view of the board could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report. And N, the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Brander. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. We are going in camera. we ready to go, mister? Thank you. The regional board has returned to open session and wishes to rise and report that the board will send a letter to Dale McCormick thanking him for his service on the Solid Waste Management Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee, and that the board will consider the first quarter strategic plan progress report at the open committee of the whole meeting in May. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming in.